Hash Part 2, Empire of Two. The call came at 2 a.m., the way bad news always did. Joon-ho answered on the first ring, already awake, already knowing. Adanna watched from their bed as his face went carefully blank, that old mask sliding back into place. When? He asked, a pause. How many? Another pause. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up, stood, started dressing in the dark with practiced efficiency. What happened? Adanna was already getting up, reaching for her own clothes. Fire at the Gangnam warehouse, the one with the luxury goods shipment from Italy, complete loss, 3 guards injured, 1 critical. He pulled on his jacket, checked his gun. The fire inspector is calling it arson. I'm coming with you. Adanna. We're partners, remember? You don't get to leave me behind anymore. She was already dressed, hair pulled back, face set in that expression he'd learned not to argue with. Besides, you'll need me. If it's arson, it's a message, and I'm better at reading messages than you are. He almost smiled, almost. 10 minutes, if you're not ready, I leave without you. She was ready in 5. The warehouse was still smoking when they arrived, fire trucks spraying the last of the flames. The acrid smell of burned luxury, designer handbags, imported watches, silk scarves worth more than most people's cars, hung in the air like a funeral shroud. The fire chief met them at the perimeter, his expression grim. Accelerant used, multiple points of origin, professional job. He handed Joon-ho a evidence bag with what looked like a piece of cloth. Found this outside the south entrance. Looks like whoever did this wanted you to know it was them. Adanna took the bag, studied the cloth through the plastic. It was expensive fabric, Italian probably, with an embroidered symbol she didn't recognize. But Joon-ho did. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The Nakamura clan, he said quietly. Who? Adanna asked. Yakuza, based in Osaka, but they've been expanding into Korean markets. We had an agreement. They stay in Japan, we stay in Korea, everyone makes money. Seems they've decided our agreement is no longer beneficial. He took the evidence bag back, studied it with cold calculation. This is a declaration of war. The next 2 weeks were a master class in criminal chess. The Nakamura clan hit 3 more of Joon-ho's operations, a gambling house in Itaewon, a smuggling route through Busan, a money laundering front disguised as a restaurant. Each hit was precise, professional, designed to cause maximum economic damage with minimum casualties. They weren't trying to kill Joon-ho's people. They were trying to bleed him dry. It's smart, Adanna said, studying the pattern on the map she'd created in Joon-ho's office. Red pins marked each attack, connected by lines of probability and timing. They're not giving you a target to hit back at. No bodies, no direct confrontations, just economic warfare. They want you to overextend, make a mistake, expose a weakness they can exploit. So what do I do? Joon-ho asked. It was a question he'd never have asked anyone else. But Adanna had proven her strategic mind 100 times over. He trusted her judgment more than his own instincts. You don't react, you adapt. Adanna circled one of the red pins, the Busan's smuggling route. They think they understand your operation, but they're working from old intelligence. Your structure has changed since I reorganized everything. Use that. Feed them false information. Make them think they're winning. And then you hit them where they're actually vulnerable. Not in Korea, in Japan. You go after their home territory while they're distracted here. Joon-ho studied his wife with something like awe. You're terrifying, you know that. I learned from the best, she replied, kissing his cheek. The plan worked beautifully. Joon-ho let the Nakamura clan think they were dismantling his empire, all while quietly reaching out to their rivals in Tokyo and Kyoto. Within a month, the Nakamura operations in Japan were facing unprecedented pressure. Police raids based on anonymous tips, business deals falling through mysteriously, key personnel disappearing. And when the clan head finally called to negotiate a ceasefire, Joon-ho's terms were simple. Stay out of Korea permanently, or the war continues until there's nothing left of your empire to fight for. They agreed. Of course they agreed. They'd been outmaneuvered by someone they'd thought would be easy prey. What they didn't know was that the someone wasn't Joon-ho. It was the African woman they dismissed as irrelevant. But victory came with complications. The Nakamura conflict had exposed something Adanna had been trying to ignore for months. She was changing Joon-ho's organization in fundamental ways, and not everyone was happy about it. The old guard, the men who'd built this empire on blood and fear, saw her influence as corruption, a softening, a betrayal of everything they'd fought for. The resistance came to a head in a lieutenant's meeting 3 weeks after the Nakamura ceasefire. Adanna wasn't supposed to be there. These meetings were traditionally men only, a relic of old-world thinking Joon-ho had never bothered to change. But he'd asked her to attend this one, to present the new organizational structure she'd designed. A structure that would move them even further from violence and deeper into legitimate business. She walked into a room full of hostile faces. 20 men, most of them twice her age, all of them looking at her like she was an infection that needed to be removed. But Adanna had faced worse. She'd survived immigration officers, racist landlords, assassination attempts. She could handle hostile businessmen. "Gentlemen," she began in perfect Korean, her accent now barely noticeable after 18 months of immersion. "Thank you for your time. I know my presence here is unconventional." "It's an insult," interrupted Park D-young, one of the oldest lieutenants. Gray-haired, scarred, a man who'd killed his first rival at 15. "This is sacred space, Korean space, and you—" He didn't finish the sentence, but everyone heard the unspoken words. "You don't belong." Adanna kept her expression neutral. "I understand your concern. Change is uncomfortable, but the numbers don't lie." She pulled up her presentation on the screen. "In the 18 months since I began restructuring operations, profits are up 47%. Law enforcement attention is down 60%. Internal conflicts have decreased by 32%. Personnel retention has improved across all divisions. These aren't opinions, they're facts." "Facts bought with weakness," Park spat. "We used to be feared. Now we're business managers, accountants, you've neutered us." "No," Joon-ho's voice cut through the room like a blade. He'd been silent until now, watching, letting Adanna handle it. But this crossed a line. "She's evolved us. There's a difference between fear and respect, between power and sustainability. The old ways were burning us out, high risk, high casualty, low return. Adanna found a better path." "A woman's path," another lieutenant muttered. The room went absolutely silent. Even Park looked shocked that someone had said it out loud. Adanna felt the familiar heat of rage building in her chest. The same rage she'd felt every time someone reduced her to her gender or her skin or her foreign status. But she'd learned to weaponize that rage, to use it as fuel instead of fire. "You're right," she said quietly. "It is a woman's path, because women learn early that direct confrontation isn't always the answer. That survival means being smarter, more strategic, more adaptable than everyone trying to destroy you. I've spent my entire life fighting systems designed to break me. And I'm still here, still standing, still winning. So yes, I brought a woman's perspective to this organization. And if you're too proud or too stupid to see the value in that, then you're not the strategic asset Joon-ho thinks you are." Park stood up, face red with fury. "You don't speak to me like—" "Sit down." Joon-ho didn't raise his voice, didn't have to. The command in those 2 words was absolute. "You will listen to my wife. You will respect her expertise, and if you can't do that, there's the door, use it." Park sat, but the hatred in his eyes was undiminished. The meeting continued, tense and hostile, but Adanna presented her entire restructuring plan without further interruption. By the end, even the skeptics had to admit the logic was sound. More money, less risk, better futures for everyone involved. It was everything a rational person should want. But rationality had nothing to do with it. This was about pride, about tradition, about men who couldn't accept that their world was changing and a foreign woman was the architect of that change. "Give them time," Joon-ho said later that night, holding Adanna while she processed the day's humiliation. "They'll adapt. And if they don't, then they'll find out what happens when they disrespect what's mine." But Adanna was learning that in Joon-ho's world, disrespect wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was subtle, insidious, deadly. The first sign came a month later. A shipment went missing, not stolen, just vanished from the manifests entirely. Adanna tracked it down personally, discovered it had been rerouted to one of Park's private operations. When she confronted him, he claimed miscommunication, apologized, promised it wouldn't happen again. It happened again 3 weeks later. Different shipment, same pattern. "He's testing me," Adanna told Joon-ho. "Seeing if I'll notice, seeing if you'll defend me when I do." "Then we make an example," Joon-ho said, reaching for his phone. "No," Adanna stopped him. "That's what he wants. Violence proves his point that I'm making you weak, that the old ways were better. We handle this my way." "Which is?" "Economics. He's skimming profits, thinking he's clever, but every transaction leaves a trail. I'll document everything, build a case so airtight he can't deny it. Then we present it to the other lieutenants. Let them see that he's not just disrespecting me, he's stealing from all of them. Make it about business, not honor. Money talks louder than pride." It took her 6 weeks to build the case. 6 weeks of tracking financial records, interviewing low-level employees, piecing together a pattern of theft that went back years. Park had been skimming for a long time, long before Adanna ever arrived. She'd just given him a convenient scapegoat to blame it on. When she presented the evidence at the next lieutenant's meeting, the room erupted. Not in her defense, she'd never expected that, but in fury at Park. He'd stolen from them, lied to them, used their prejudice against Adanna to hide his crimes. It was the ultimate betrayal. Joon-ho let them rage for exactly 5 minutes. Then he raised his hand, and silence fell immediately. "Park D-young," he said, his voice carrying the weight of judgment. "You've served this organization for 30 years. You killed for it, bled for it, built it alongside my father. For that, I'm giving you a choice. Return everyone you've stolen, step down from your position and live quietly, or refuse and face the consequences of theft." Park's face went through a dozen emotions: rage, humiliation, calculation. Everyone in the room knew what consequences meant. Finally, broken and bitter, he nodded. "I'll return it." "Good, you have 48 hours, then you're out." After the meeting, after Park had shuffled out in disgrace, several of the other lieutenants approached Adanna. Not to apologize, Korean men like that didn't apologize, but to acknowledge. A nod here. A grunt of respect there. The barest recognition that maybe, possibly, she'd earned her place. It was something, not everything, but something. That night, in their bedroom, Joon-ho held Adanna close and whispered, "You didn't need me at all today." "I always need you," she replied. "Just not to fight my battles, only to stand beside me while I fight them myself." "I can do that." "I know." But the victory was bittersweet, because Adanna was learning that in this world there were always more battles, always more people who wanted her gone, always more tests of whether she was strong enough, smart enough, valuable enough to deserve the space she occupied. The next challenge came from an unexpected direction: Joon-ho's mother. Adanna had met her exactly twice in 18 months. Once at the wedding, where the older woman had attended out of duty and left within 20 minutes. Once at a hospital, when Joon-ho's aunt had been sick, where she'd acknowledged Adanna's presence with the barest of nods before focusing entirely on her son. Now she was requesting a private meeting, just the two of them. "Don't go," Joon-ho said immediately. "She'll try to." "I have to go," Adanna interrupted. "She's your mother, and if I refuse, it proves I'm afraid of her, that I don't belong in this family." "You don't have to prove anything to her." "Yes, I do. Not for her sake, for mine." They met at an expensive restaurant in Gangnam, the kind of place where everyone spoke in hushed tones and the tea cost more than most people's meals. Joon-ho's mother, Kwon Mi-sun, arrived exactly on time, dressed in a traditional hanbok that probably cost more than Adanna's car. She sat across from Adanna with the posture of a queen granting audience to a peasant. "Thank you for coming," Mi-sun said in Korean, her voice perfectly polite and utterly cold. "Thank you for the invitation," Adanna replied in equally perfect Korean. A flicker of surprise crossed Mi-sun's face. Your Korean has improved. I practice. Yes, I've heard you practice many things. Business, strategy, playing house with my son. Mi-sun poured tea with meticulous precision. Tell me, Adanna, what is it you want from this marriage? There it was, the real question, the accusation beneath the politeness. I want what anyone wants, Adanna said carefully. Partnership, respect, love. Love. Mi-sun tasted the word like it was poison. My son doesn't love. He hasn't since he was 17 years old and his father died in his arms. He controls, he possesses, he uses, but he doesn't love. So what are you really after? Money, status, a visa? Adanna felt anger building but kept her voice level. With respect, Mrs. Kwon, you don't know your son as well as you think. Yes, he was broken. Yes, he built walls, but I've seen behind them. I've seen the man he's becoming. And that man does love. Maybe not the way you remember, maybe not the way you wanted, but it's real. You're changing him. He's changing himself. I'm just giving him a reason to. Mi-sun studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. It wasn't warm, but it was genuine. My husband used to say that the most dangerous people aren't the ones with weapons. They're the ones with vision, the ones who can see what others can't and make it real. She sipped her tea. I can see why Joon-ho chose you. You're dangerous in all the right ways. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. Mi-sun set down her cup. I didn't come here to approve of you. I came here to understand you. Because like it or not, you're family now. And in this family, we protect each other, even when we don't particularly like each other. It was the closest thing to acceptance Adanna would ever get from this woman. She took it. I can work with that, Adanna said. Good, because what's coming will require all of us. What's coming? Mi-sun's expression darkened. Change, the kind that makes the Nakamura conflict look like a warm-up. There are powers in this country, politicians, chaebols, other criminal organizations that have tolerated Joon-ho's empire because it was predictable. Violent, yes, but predictable. Now you're making it unpredictable, legitimate, threatening their markets. They won't allow that. Let them try to stop us. Confidence is good, naivety is deadly, don't confuse the two. Mi-sun stood, preparing to leave. My son loves you, I can see that now. So I'll give you one piece of advice, woman to woman. In this world, love is a weakness they will exploit. Protect it. Hide it. Never let them see how much you care, because the moment they do, they'll use it to destroy you both. She left before Adanna could respond. That night, Adanna told Joon-ho everything. He listened in silence, his expression unreadable. She's right, he finally said. About all of it. We've been moving too fast, changing too much. We've made enemies without even realizing it. So what do? We prepare, we build alliances, we make ourselves too valuable to destroy. He pulled her close. And we never, ever let them see you're my weakness. Because you are, Adanna. You're the only thing in this world I can't lose. Then we make sure they never get the chance to take me. But fate, as always, had other plans. The attack came 3 months later, during the one moment when Joon-ho's guard was down, at a charity gala of all places. It was a legitimate event, the kind Adanna had been pushing him to attend more of. Politicians, businessmen, society wives. A chance to show that the Kwon organization was evolving, becoming respectable. Adanna wore a gown that cost more than her first year's salary in Korea. Joon-ho wore a tuxedo that made him look like he'd been born to wealth instead of violence. They danced together, smiled at the right people, made the right donations. For one evening, they were almost normal. Then the lights went out. In the chaos that followed, screaming, stamping, gunfire, Adanna lost Joon-ho. One moment his hand was in hers. The next she was alone in the dark, being pushed by panicked crowds toward the exits. She tried to fight back toward where she'd last seen him, but the crowd was too strong. Someone grabbed her arm, hard, pulled her sideways into a service corridor. Joon-ho, she gasped. Not quite. The voice was unfamiliar. The knife pressed to her ribs was not. Walk, the man commanded. Quietly, or I open your stomach right here. Adanna walked. Through the service corridor, down maintenance stairs, into a parking garage where a van waited. They pushed her inside, zip-tied her wrists, put a hood over her head, and drove. She tried to track the turns, count the minutes, anything that would tell her where they were going. But fear was making it hard to think clearly. All she could focus on was Joon-ho. Was he safe? Was he hurt? Did he even know she was gone yet? When the van finally stopped and they pulled her out, she could smell water. Seawater. They were near the coast. Incheon, maybe, or Busan. Somewhere ships came and went without too many questions. They led her into a building, a warehouse from the acoustics, and removed her hood. She was surrounded by 10 armed men. And at the center, sitting in an expensive chair like it was a throne, was a man she'd never seen before. Korean, mid-50s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most cars. He had the kind of face that belonged on corporate boards, not in kidnapping operations. "Miss Ackhafer," he said in English, his accent British-educated. "Or should I say Mrs. Kwon? I'm never quite sure with modern marriages how women prefer to be addressed." "Who are you?" "Lee Sang-hoon. Though the name probably means nothing to you. I'm what you might call a legitimate businessman with occasionally illegitimate interests." He gestured to a chair opposite him. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." Adanna sat because staying standing seemed pointless. "If this is about ransom..." "It's not about money. It's about the future. Specifically, the future of organized crime in Korea. Your husband has been disrupting very carefully balanced ecosystems, moving operations away from traditional revenue streams, making deals with people he shouldn't, generally making life difficult for those of us who prefer the status quo." "Progress is uncomfortable," Adanna said. "Progress is expensive, and I didn't become wealthy by embracing expense when elimination is cheaper." Lee leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call your husband. You're going to tell him that you've decided this life isn't for you, that you're leaving Korea, leaving him, going back to Nigeria. And then you're going to get on a plane and do exactly that. And if I refuse, then I kill you, slowly, and make sure Joon-ho watches every second before I kill him too." Lee's smile was pleasant, like he was discussing the weather. "But that's messy and public and draws law enforcement attention. Much cleaner if you just leave. Joon-ho falls apart without you. My sources say you're his only weakness, and his organization crumbles. Natural consequences, no violence necessary." Adanna's mind raced. If she agreed, she might buy time. But Lee wasn't stupid. He'd make sure she actually left Korea before releasing her. And once she was gone, Joon-ho would be vulnerable, broken, exactly what Lee wanted. If she refused, she'd die. But at least Joon-ho would know it was murder, not abandonment. He'd come for Lee with everything he had. It would be war, but it would be honest war. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "You have 5 minutes." They left her alone in the chair, still zip-tied, still surrounded, but at least given the illusion of space to decide. Adanna closed her eyes and did what she always did when backed into a corner, she thought. Calculated. Looked for the angle everyone else missed. Lee's mistake was assuming she was just Joon-ho's weakness. That she was a soft target, easy to manipulate, valuable only as leverage. He hadn't considered that she might be dangerous in her own right. That 18 months in Joon-ho's world had taught her things, given her resources, made her someone who didn't break easily. She opened her eyes. "I've decided." Lee looked pleased. "Wise choice." "I'm not leaving." The pleasure vanished. "Then you die." "Maybe, but not before I tell you something important." Adanna leaned forward as much as her restraints allowed. "You researched Joon-ho. You know his operations, his weaknesses, his patterns. But you didn't research me. You don't know that I've been documenting corruption in Korean politics for 6 months. Building evidence files on officials who take bribes, businessmen who trade in influence. I was going to use it to protect Joon-ho's interests, but I kept backups. Lots of backups. And if I don't check in with my contact by midnight tonight, all of it, every file, every scandal, every dirty secret goes to the media. To the international media, where your money can't stop it." It was a bluff, partially. She did have files, but not nearly as comprehensive as she was claiming. But Lee didn't know that. You're lying, he said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. I want to take that chance. Because I promise you, Lee Sang-hoon, if those files go public, you won't just lose money. You'll lose legitimacy. And for a man like you, that's a death sentence. Before Lee could respond, the warehouse door exploded inward. This time it wasn't Joon-ho leading the assault. It was Mi-sun. Joon-ho's mother walked in like an avenging angel, flanked by 20 armed men wearing the insignia of the original Kwon organization, the loyal, old guard members who'd served Joon-ho's father. Behind them, Joon-ho himself, looking like death incarnate. Lee Sang-hoon, Mi-sun said, her voice cutting through the warehouse like a blade. Did you really think you could touch my daughter-in-law without consequences? The firefight was brief and brutal. Lee's men were professional, but they were outnumbered and outmatched by fighters who'd been training for this kind of warfare since childhood. Within minutes, it was over. Lee was on his knees, bleeding from a shoulder wound, surrounded by bodies. Joon-ho walked straight to Adanna, cut her zip ties with a knife that had probably seen more blood than she wanted to imagine, pulled her into his arms with a desperation that spoke louder than any words. I thought I lost you, he whispered into her hair. Not that easily, she whispered back. Mi-sun approached Lee, looked down at him with absolute contempt. You made 3 mistakes tonight. First, you targeted family. Second, you underestimated a woman. Third, you forgot that the Kwon family has been surviving people like you for 3 generations. We don't fold. We don't break. We burn our enemies to ash and build empires on their graves. You can't, Lee started. We already did. Mi-sun pulled out her phone, showed him the screen. While you were busy kidnapping my daughter-in-law, I was busy liquidating every asset you have in Korea. Your accounts, your properties, your shell corporations, all frozen or seized. You're financially dead, Mr. Lee. You just don't know it yet. Lee's face went white. That's impossible. Nothing is impossible when you know the right people. And I've been building relationships in this country since before you learned to walk. She nodded to the men flanking Lee. Get him out of my sight. The Americans have been looking for evidence of his money laundering operations. I'm sure they'll be delighted with what we provide. They dragged Lee away, still sputtering threats that rang hollow in the empty warehouse. When they were alone, Joon-ho, Adanna, and Mi-sun, and strange silence fell. Finally, Adanna spoke. Thank you for coming for me. Mi-sun shrugged, elegant even in a warehouse that smelled of gunpowder and blood. Your family. We protect family, even the unconventional ones. She looked at Joon-ho, especially the ones who make my son human again. Then she left, her bodyguards following, leaving Adanna and Joon-ho alone in the aftermath. Your mother is terrifying, Adanna said. I know, I get it from her. I'm starting to understand that. They stood there, holding each other, processing how close they'd come to losing everything. Finally, Joon-ho pulled back enough to look at her face. I can't keep doing this. Can't keep almost losing you. Can't keep pulling you back from the edge of death because I'm too stubborn to let go of this empire. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe you were right from the beginning. Maybe it's time to go legitimate. Completely. Not just moving away from violence, but actually leaving this world behind. Building something new. Something where you don't have to be kidnapped every 6 months just for being with me. Adanna studied his face, saw the sincerity there, the exhaustion, the desperate desire to be something more than what his father had made him. That's a beautiful dream, she said softly. But you can't just walk away from an empire. It doesn't work that way. We could try. We could, but first we need to make sure there's nothing left behind that can follow us. No loose ends. No enemies waiting for their chance. We clean house completely, set up succession, build enough legitimate business that we never have to look back. She touched his face. And then maybe we get our normal life. How long? 2 years, maybe 3. I'll take it, as long as at the end I get you, just you, no empire, no violence, just us. Deal. They sealed it with a kiss there in that warehouse, surrounded by evidence of the violence that had defined their relationship. But also, for the first time, with a clear vision of life beyond it. A future where love wasn't a weakness or a target, but simply the point of everything. The work started the next day. Adanna created a 5-year transition plan that would slowly, carefully move the Kwon organization from criminal to legitimate. They invested in tech startups, real estate development, import-export businesses that didn't require smuggling. They promoted younger members who understood the value of evolution. They carefully cut ties with the most violent operations, making sure everyone involved had either a golden parachute or a very strong incentive to stay quiet. It was slow, frustrating, complicated in ways that made the Nakamura conflict look simple, but it worked. 3 years later, Kwon Joon-ho and Adanna Kwon stood on the deck of a beach house in Jeju Island, watching the sunset over water that stretched to forever. Joon-ho had officially retired from the organization, turning leadership over to a protege who understood Adanna's vision. They still owned significant shares in various enterprises, still had wealth beyond anything Adanna had imagined as a struggling immigrant. But it was clean wealth now, legal wealth. The kind that let them sleep at night, without armed guards outside the door. "Do you miss it?" Adanna asked, her hand in his. Joon-ho considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I miss the clarity of it, the simplicity of violence as a solution, but then I remember what it cost, what I became, and I wouldn't trade this." He gestured to the sunset, to her, to the peace they'd built, for anything. Even on bad days. Especially on bad days. Adanna smiled. She'd learned Korean so fluently now that people sometimes forgot she wasn't born speaking it. She'd started a legitimate consulting business, helping other companies restructure and improve efficiency. She'd even started writing a book about organizational transformation, though she'd changed enough details that no one would recognize the criminal empire she was actually describing. And she'd made peace with Korea. It would never be fully home. She still faced racism, still got stared at, still had to work twice as hard for half the credit. But she'd built a life here worth fighting for, had found love in the most unlikely place, had become someone her younger self wouldn't even recognize. "I'm pregnant," she said suddenly. Joon-ho turned to her so fast he almost dropped his drink. "What?" "3 months. I wasn't sure how to tell you. I know we talked about maybe having kids eventually, but I didn't know if you were ready." He kissed her, lifted her off her feet and spun her around while she laughed and told him to be careful. When he set her down, his eyes were wet. "I'm going to be a father." "Terrifying, right?" "Absolutely, but the good kind of terrifying." He knelt down, put his hand on her still flat stomach. "Our child is going to have a better life than I did, better than either of us did. They're going to grow up knowing they're loved, knowing they're enough exactly as they are, knowing that love isn't a weakness, it's the strongest thing there is. They're going to have your determination and my stubbornness. God help us. God help them. With us as parents, they're going to need all the help they can get." They laughed together as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere behind them, in the house they'd built together, dinner was waiting. A normal dinner. A normal evening. The kind of beautiful, boring normalcy they'd fought wars to achieve. And in that moment, watching the last light fade from the sky with the man she loved, and the child they'd created growing inside her, Adanna Akhafer, Adanna Kwon, finally felt like she'd found what she'd been searching for all along. Home wasn't Nigeria, wasn't Korea, wasn't any place on a map. Home was standing on a beach at sunset with the person who saw all of you, every scar, every fear, every impossible dream, and chose you anyway. Home was love, messy and complicated and hard-won and absolutely worth it. Home was here. Thank you so much for staying with Adanna and Joon-ho's journey to the end. If this story touched your heart, if their struggle resonated with you, if you believe in love that crosses borders and breaks barriers, please subscribe to this channel. Hit that like button. Drop a comment sharing your favorite moment or what this story meant to you. Your support is what allows me to keep creating these stories of hope, transformation, and love that refuses to quit. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing in stories where the unlikely couple doesn't just survive, they thrive.